Thank you for listening to Shulchanaruchharav.com.
The mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihyu. In the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, we are acquainted with the famous scriptural verse of Kedoshim Tihyu ki kadosh ani. God instructs the Jewish people, be holy as I am holy. What is the meaning of this command and instruction? Isn't the concept of holiness a most subjective terminology? For one person, a holy act, for another person may be a mundane act or even a profane act. Different minds interpret holiness differently. What practically then is the instruction of the Torah when it tells us be holy? And if it's merely saying follow my commands and by doing so you're holy, then what inclusion is being added by this command? So we'll first begin with, is this mitzvah or instruction that we find in the parsha indeed listed by the Meinei HaMitzvahs as one of the 613 commands? So interestingly, we find that amongst many of the Meinei HaMitzvahs, which include the Rambam, the Chinuch, and others, only one lists the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihyu as a biblical command. So is the opinion of the Sefer Charedim in chapter 20, halacha 13, in the name of the Rashbag, Rabbeinu Shloime Ibn Gavriel, who listed as part of the 613. However, the Rambam, the Chinuch, and the other Meinei HaMitzvahs all completely ignore and omit it. So whatever the message is in the verse of Kedoshim Tihyu, some view it as a binding biblical command, while most view it as not. Or, in other words, some view it as a specific instruction in a specific area, while others view it as a general instruction to keep the mitzvahs, and therefore it's not listed as another one of the 613, as is the rule in the Meinei HaMitzvahs not to write general commands in the 613. The problem with all this is, however, is that we have an explicit Gemara in Maseches Yevamis 20a, in which Rava states a direct and detailed teaching that is learned from this pasuk. Rava says that it is a mitzvah for one to sanctify himself with that which is permitted. In other words, the unique command and instruction conveyed by the Torah in its instruction of Kedoshim Tihyu is that in addition to keeping all the commands of the Torah as is listed in the Torah, even those matters which were not directly prohibited by the Torah and are hence mutter, permitted, one is to sanctify himself with that which is permitted. One is to withhold from indulging in them if it is not necessary for his service of God or bodily health, if they are mere extravagances that aren't needed. So if this is the case, why then do not all the Rishonim list this mitzvah as one of the 613? So in truth, this is where we reach the machlekes and Rishonim regarding whether this Talmudic statement is to be viewed as a biblical command based on the verse in Scripture, or as a rabbinical command and is merely using support from the verse in Scripture. So while the Sefer Charedim is of the position, and so is also the opinion of the Ramban and others, that Kedoshim Tihyu, to sanctify oneself with the permitted, is an actual biblical positive command of the Torah, meaning that even those things the Torah did not prohibit and it allows you to do, you have a biblical obligation to regulate in accordance to what is necessary. While others, which is the majority of Rishonim, learn that in truth it's not biblical but merely rabbinical. Furthermore, even amongst those Rishonim who don't list it as a biblical command, we find that they learn from the pasuk of Leisasuru Achri Levavchem and from other psukim that there is a negative command against indulging in pleasures unnecessarily. So is recorded in the Chinuch Mitzvah 387, the Rambam Leisei 47, and others. Practically, how do the Poskim rule? So the Mechaber has an entire chapter in Shulchanaruch, chapter 231 in Orach Chaim, dedicated to this concept of Kadesh Atzcho Mutulucha, sanctifying yourself with the permitted, and he writes that it's an act of praise and piety to do so, to regulate even the permissible actions, which of course implies that he took the approach of majority of Rishonim that it is not a biblical obligation. Although nonetheless in his conclusion of the halacha he then writes that one is obligated to limit things, so he does them only for the sake of heaven. The approach of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya is that it is an actual biblical command, like rules the Charedim, as he writes in chapter 27 and 30 in Tanya. And there he explicitly explains and clarifies that even according to the dissenting approach, it's nevertheless rabbinically obligated. Indeed, the accepted ruling of Chassidus is that it is an actual biblical obligation. So to summarize, Judaism preaches, as is conveyed from the message of Kedoshim Tihyu, that a Jew is obligated to lead his life in a way that not only does he not transgress the explicit prohibitions, but even the permissible acts are regulated in accordance to his need of service of God. And while we find debate as whether this is considered a biblical or rabbinical obligation or an aspect of an act of piety, practically the ruling of Chassidus is that it is an actual biblical obligation to do so. Now many may think and may ask, a bombshell was just thrown at me. It's not enough to keep all the detailed halachas and Shulchan Aruch. Now I have to start biblically or rabbinically regulating all my permissible actions and judge if they're done for the sake of Hashem. This is too much, it's too overwhelming. So while of course this is the ideal level of a tzaddik, nonetheless each individual can already start to implement slightly in different matters of his day to sanctify himself with the permitted. And just because he can't do it 100% in all of his actions doesn't mean he shouldn't try regulating it at all and try to fulfill this mitzvah somewhat regarding some matters. This, of course, is most highlighted regarding diets and regulating one's food's habits to not indulge in unhealthy foods in order so his body be strong and healthy for Avodas Hashem and for longevity of life. In the Chassidic discourse said in 5.7.17, the Rebbe explains that in fact the service of sanctifying oneself with the permitted, those actions are able to draw down a more internalized and permeated divine light than even the actual observance of the actual mitzvahs. And thus we should never nonchalantly throw off the concept of piety and regulating the permitted as something that belongs only to the most righteous, but rather it's something that can be exemplified by each individual throughout their day in various actions.
Thank you for listening to Shulchanaruchharav.com. Our free services of making Torah knowledge available to the public depends on donors like you. Please help us continue our work through making even a small contribution at Shulchanaruchharav.com under the Daily Halacha Dedication section or in the subscription page. Also, check out our online courses and many sefarim available for purchase that will both enhance your Torah knowledge and help support our work.